A quiet Seattle suburb was shaken by a brutal murder. At the center of the investigation were not only the prime suspect but also the wife of the lead detective. This criminal case tested not only the justice system but also human relationships. Ethan Miller, a seasoned homicide detective, takes on the investigation of the savage murder of a young woman. The charismatic businessman Mason Carter becomes the prime suspect. However, Ethan has no idea that his own wife, Lila, has been having an affair with Mason for several months. A tangled story of lies, passion, and betrayal puts the detective in a dilemma between his professional duty and love. What will prove stronger? His desire to uncover the truth or blind faith in the woman he loves? How far is Lila willing to go to protect her lover? And what other shocking secrets are hidden behind the respectable facades? This is a story of how love and hate, truth and lies intertwine into a tight knot that not everyone can unravel. Welcome to a world of shadowy passions and true crime dramas. The morning of September 15th began with a disturbing phone call for Detective Ethan Miller. In a quiet Seattle suburb, the body of 28-year-old Amanda Wilson had been found. The young woman, a promising lawyer, was brutally murdered in her own home. Ethan was one of the first to arrive at the crime scene. The sight was horrific. Amanda lay in a pool of blood in the living room, her body riddled with multiple stab wounds. The killer had clearly been in a state of uncontrollable rage. After interviewing neighbors, Ethan learned that Amanda had been expecting a guest the previous evening. One of the witnesses saw a luxury car near her house, noting its striking bright red color. Running the plates, Ethan found that the car belonged to Mason Carter, a successful restaurant owner. Ethan called Carter in for questioning. Outwardly, Mason seemed shaken by the news of Amanda's death, but something about his behavior made the detective uneasy. His answers were too smooth, almost rehearsed. And when Ethan directly asked if he had had an affair with the victim, Carter was too quick to deny it. That same evening, Ethan's wife, Lila, told him she was meeting a friend and would be home late. Unaware of anything suspicious, Ethan didn't think much of it. Little did he know that at that very moment, his wife was lying in bed with the prime suspect in the murder case. The relationship between Lila Miller and Mason Carter had begun several months earlier. They met by chance at the opening of a new art gallery. Lila had just completed her first major project at a design firm and decided to celebrate the occasion. Mason immediately caught her attention with his charisma and charm. He knew how to woo her, showering her with compliments and expensive gifts. Compared to her always busy husband, Ethan, Mason's attention felt like a breath of fresh air to Lila. At first, it was just flirting, exchanging suggestive glances and seemingly accidental touches. But over time, the harmless affair evolved into something much more. Secret meetings, passionate kisses stolen in the dark, and wild hotel sex on the outskirts of the city. Lila knew she was walking a dangerous line. She wasn't just cheating on her husband. She was sleeping with a potential criminal. The deeper Ethan delved into Amanda's murder investigation, the more Mason's involvement seemed undeniable. Yet, Lila couldn't bring herself to end the relationship. She had spent too long living as the perfect wife and obedient daughter. With Mason, she felt desired and special for the first time. He awakened a passion and zest for life that she had long given up on. Still, leading a double life was becoming increasingly difficult for Lila. She constantly had to lie to her husband, inventing new excuses for late returns and sudden absences. Ethan remained oblivious, continuing to see her as a loyal partner and steadfast support. But how much longer could Lila balance between two men? What if Ethan eventually discovered the truth? The fear of being exposed and losing her reputation weighed heavier on her with each passing day. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to give up the irresistible affair with Mason. The investigation into Amanda Wilson's murder was progressing slowly. Despite all his efforts, Ethan Miller couldn't find any direct evidence against Mason Carter. Even a thorough search of the businessman's home and office yielded no results. During a second interrogation, Mason remained calm and composed. He answered all questions clearly and consistently. Most importantly, he had an alibi for the time of the murder. According to Carter, He had spent the entire evening at a charity event downtown. Ethan checked this information. Indeed, security cameras had captured Mason at the event, and dozens of guests confirmed seeing him there. But something about the story still bothered the detective. It all seemed too smooth. That evening, Ethan shared his doubts with his wife, Lila. She listened intently, but inside, she was consumed with fear. She knew Mason's alibi was a lie because that night he was with her at a secluded cottage outside the city. It was Lila who had advised her lover to use the charity event as an alibi. She had even arranged for a few influential guests to confirm his presence. Lila knew just how serious the suspicions against Mason were, and she was willing to do anything to protect him. The next day, Lila went to her husband's office. With a shaky voice, she claimed that she had accidentally seen Mason Carter at the charity event on the night of the murder. She said she had been there too but left early. Ethan was surprised since his wife hadn't mentioned her plans before, but it never crossed his mind that Lila was lying. He was too used to trusting her. His wife's testimony became the final piece of evidence that cleared Mason's name. The case hit a dead end. The police had no more leads, and the prime suspect appeared innocent. Ethan had to admit that his instincts had failed him this time. With a heavy heart, he released Mason Carter. Lila breathed a sigh of relief when her husband told her the news. Her lover was safe. The price? Just another lie added to the pile. Day after day, deceiving Ethan had become almost second nature to her. But Detective Miller wasn't one to give up easily. Even after officially closing the case, he kept searching for the truth. Ethan sensed that he was missing something important, and it was directly tied to Mason Carter. Weeks passed, but Ethan didn't stop searching. He reviewed old reports and interviewed new witnesses. He learned that, months before her death, Amanda Wilson had been receiving threats from an unknown man, accusing her of knowing too much about certain illegal dealings. Ethan speculated that Mason Carter might have been behind these threats. Perhaps Amanda had uncovered some dark secrets about his business and paid the price with her life. The theory seemed plausible, but Ethan still had no concrete evidence. Meanwhile, the tension between Ethan and Lila continued to grow. Their relationship had deteriorated since the scandalous murder. Ethan was rarely home, spending days and nights at work. Lila, in any free moment, ran off to meet Mason. They argued more frequently, accusing each other of coldness and indifference, but neither dared to voice the real reason for the rift. To do so would mean confronting the uncomfortable truths about lies, infidelity, and betrayal. It became harder for Ethan to ignore the oddities in his wife's behavior. Her constant late hours, vague explanations, and jumbled excuses weighed on his mind. He still remembered how Lila had lied about attending the charity event on the night of the murder. Could it all have been to provide Carter with an alibi? To either dispel or confirm his suspicions, Ethan took a desperate step. He began secretly surveilling his own wife. Bugs in her phone, hidden cameras, private investigators. He was willing to use any means necessary. And soon his efforts bore fruit. In one set of photos, Ethan was horrified to recognize Lila in Mason Carter's arms. They were kissing while sitting in a car, at the very spot where a witness had seen them on the night of the murder. All doubts vanished at once. Lila had been having an affair with the prime suspect in Ethan's case. She had covered for a killer, lied to her husband's face, and protected her lover. The personal and professional had become a tangled web that Ethan now had to unravel. Ethan stood before a painful choice. He could pretend he didn't know, turn a blind eye to his wife's affair and her connection to a criminal. Perhaps then, he could maintain the facade of a family and avoid a dirty public scandal. But as a detective, Ethan knew all too well where leniency towards lawbreakers leads. And as a man, he couldn't forgive Lila's double betrayal, of their marital vows and of the trust he held as her husband and a police officer. So Ethan chose the truth no matter how bitter it was. He set a final trap for the deceivers. That evening, Lila and Mason were relaxing at their usual cottage outside the city, unaware they were being watched. Ethan burst into the house in the middle of dinner. Seeing her husband at the door, Lila was speechless at first, then collapsed into tears, begging for forgiveness. She spoke of a momentary weakness, swore she only loved him. Mason, on the other hand, remained coldly silent. But when Ethan announced he had obtained a search warrant for their love nest, Carter visibly tensed. The search indeed produced results. In Mason's safe, they found a blood-stained knife, the weapon used to kill Amanda Wilson. Among the papers were documents revealing his financial fraud. It turned out Mason wasn't just having an affair with Ethan's wife. He had been using Lila and her connections within the police to divert suspicion from himself. Carter killed Amanda when he realized she had uncovered his dirty secrets, and he hoped the love-struck Lila would help him escape justice. In that moment, it was as if a veil lifted from Lila's eyes. She realized she had been nothing but a pawn in the game of a cold-blooded killer who cared only for himself. All his sweet words of love had been mere manipulation. The realization hit Lila like a physical blow. Mason, however, transitioned from smugness to helpless rage. He shouted threats, accusing Ethan and Lila of conspiring against him. But the evidence was undeniable. Carter was arrested for murder, and Lila, as an accomplice who had lied to the investigation, was taken in as well. The SWAT team led the lovers away in handcuffs, under the flashing lights of police cars. They walked without looking at each other, as if they were strangers. Ethan watched his wife with bitterness and disappointment. How could she have deceived him so cruelly, destroyed their family, their love? Ahead lay a painful trial for all three of them. Mason faced an almost certain conviction. Lila faced public disgrace and prison, and Ethan was left with loneliness and the collapse of all his hopes. A cruel end to this tangled story. The tragedy that unfolded between Ethan, Lila, and Mason is a story of how distrust and lies can poison any relationship. Family bonds, friendship, romantic love. All these can be shattered when people begin to deceive one another. Ethan was an exemplary police officer, dutifully serving the law. But for too long, he ignored the oddities in his wife's behavior, afraid of the unpleasant truth. In the end, that truth caught up with him, offering no mercy. Lila seemed like the perfect wife, but deep down, she had long been unhappy. She craved passion, tenderness, the feeling of being special. When she met Mason, she never imagined that the relationship would bring her only pain and disappointment. Was a moment of pleasure worth such a sacrifice? Mason presented himself as a respectable businessman, but behind the mask of decency lurked a cold-blooded killer and swindler. He didn't love Lila. He merely used her feelings to his advantage. She was nothing more than a pawn in his pursuit of selfish goals. The outcome of this story is sad, but instructive. Betrayal, lies, and deceit inevitably destroy even the strongest bonds. The truth always surfaces, and the price can be unbearably high. It's far simpler and more honest to speak openly with each other from the beginning. This applies to spouses whose marriage has started to crack, to friends whose trust has been shaken, and to business partners caught up in greed. All relationships are built on respect and sincerity. Without them, pain and broken dreams are inevitable. Valentina and Mason paid the full price for their selfishness and disregard for the feelings of others. Ethan made the right choice by pursuing justice, no matter how painful it was. Only honesty with oneself and with others can prevent irreparable mistakes. Thus, this crime drama is more than just a gripping detective story. It is also a warning to all those living in deceit and infidelity. Sooner or later, they will have to pay dearly, ruining not only their own lives but also the lives of those close to them. It's a lesson worth remembering for everyone.